Coming off a nail-biter last week, the Sooners look to turn things around as they travel to Lawrence to face the Kansas Jayhawks. Here's a quick breakdown of each team's current status, keys to victory, and final prediction for the game. As you can see, Venables wasn't too happy with the team's performance last Saturday. Let's start with the offense. Dillon Gabriel was fresh off a Heisman moment and a bye week into a game against his former school with what I can assume to be revenge on his mind, after fans gave him the business for transferring. I expected him to torch UCF, and while he did put up over 250 yards and 3 touchdowns, it was far from his most dominant performance. He had some moments of old DG, but I was impressed with his pocket presence and composure through most of the game. With the disappointing performances we saw this week from other Heisman contenders like Caleb Williams and Michael Penix Jr., Gabriel was solid. And at the end of the day, that was what he needed to help lead Oklahoma to victory. Mark my words. This team has zero chance at competing for a national title until the run game gets figured out. I was hoping with UCF having one of the worst run defenses in the country that this would be the game the Sooners got things going, and boy was I wrong. Tawi Walker was out due to an in-house suspension, and for the majority of the game the backs were getting tackled by a strong wind. The only bright spot I saw was that late in the fourth, the run game actually started looking a bit decent, and Sawchuk had some good carries. Outside of that, it continues to be a weak point of the team that I guarantee will cost Oklahoma at least one loss this season. Part of this is due to the run blocking performance of the offensive line that absolutely got manhandled by UCF at times during the game, which is unacceptable given the talent gap. On a positive note, they did a good job of giving Gabriel time in the pocket, and that combined with his presence and willingness to stay there resulted in some great plays through the air. Nick Anderson and Drake Stoops stood out receiving, combining for a total of 165 yards and 3 touchdowns. Outside of them and Jaleel Farouk, someone is going to need to step up to replace Andrew Anthony's production, and no one did last week. Jeff Lebby was not good. The regression from the Texas game was actually impressive. The Sooners were unable to take advantage of incredible field position early, and outside of a few big plays, the offense looked rough until the last couple of drives in the fourth quarter. Again, similar to the run game, it's only a matter of time before poor play calling and execution catches Oklahoma, and the team was lucky to come away with a W. Speaking of lucky, Zach Schmidt is thanking his lucky stars his 2 field goal misses didn't cost OU, especially considering a kicker named Boomer on the other side was absolutely drilling them with ease. Even the extra points looked rough. With the game on the line, I have zero faith in getting 3. On the positive side of things, Luke Elzinga had some excellent punts, including 4 within 20 and a 51.6 yard average. After the way the punt unit has performed all year, this was a welcome surprise, and I fully expect him to retain punt duties through the rest of the season. While it wasn't the offensive performance Sooner fans were hoping for, and was inconsistent at best, 31 points got the job done this week. Just barely. Defensively, I have some mixed feelings. The defensive front played well for the majority of the game, but there were some big misdirection plays in the run game where they got bullied a bit. Outside of those plays, it's hard to be disappointed when the team finishes with 13 TFLs, and a big part of that starts with the line. They also held one of the best rushing teams in the nation in check. Overall, the performance was solid. Out of the top 5 tacklers this game, 3 were linebackers, including Danny Stutzman leading the team with 12. Jaren Kanak did have a boneheaded taunting penalty, and on a couple of big chunk runs, it felt like they got caught out of position or over pursuing. Not a bad performance, but not the standard they have set for the year. Defensive backs were aggressive and got caught a couple of times. In fact, 2 receptions accounted for over half of UCF's total passing yards. Outside of that, the secondary played well through the majority of the game. The biggest issue for the defense as a whole was that the aggressiveness they played with resulted in a couple of big runs and passes, but 0 forced turnovers. Oklahoma lost the turnover battle for what I believe was the first time all year and nearly lost the game. I'll be curious to see if more teams implement some of the misdirection runs to take advantage of the relentless pursuit to the ball the defense has. Overall, the defense had a great game outside of maybe 5 minutes of total game time. But sometimes 5 minutes is all it takes to lose. Kansas welcomes Oklahoma to Lawrence after a bye week, which may have been just what the doctor ordered. As of recording this, the status of Kansas star Jalen Daniels is unknown. The dual threat quarterback has been dealing with a back issue that dates to the offseason, but in the 3 starts he's had this year, he's led the Jayhawks to a 3-0 record, throwing for 705 yards and 5 touchdowns. When playing, Kansas is a whole different animal to deal with. The good news for Jayhawks fans is that they have a serviceable veteran backup quarterback in Jason Bean, who has great north-south speed and has 913 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions this year. Unfortunately, in games he has started, Kansas is just 2-2, including a blowout loss to Texas and a close loss to OSU in their most recent game, where he did throw for over 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. Regardless of who starts, the OU defense will have its hands full, but Bean is likely the lesser of the two evils in the eyes of Sooner Nation. Once you get past the quarterback threat, you hit the backfield, led by the two-headed monster of Devin Neal and Daniel Highshaw Jr. Both are absolute studs, tallying 6 touchdowns apiece, a combined 1,096 yards, and averaging 7.3 and 6.4 yards per carry respectively. Simply put, they're dudes, and the biggest strength of the KU offense. They are having the type of production I wanted to see from Sooner backs this season. While the UCF running backs may have had better numbers, I've been worried about this duo since the schedule came out, and I anticipate it being a challenge to contain them. It can be tough at receiver when you have rotation at the quarterback position, but the same 4 from last season lead the way this year, including Lawrence Arnold, Quinn Skinner, Luke Grimm, and tight end Mason Fairchild. And just in case Sooner Nation forgot the names, Arnold and Fairchild combined for 227 yards and 4 touchdowns in last year's matchup. 3 of the 4 are big bodies at 6'3" and up, and have the potential to cause matchup problems in the secondary. The offensive line also returned multiple starters and have managed to stay relatively healthy. They only allow about 1 sack per game and pave the way for a 5.6 yards per carry average. The team currently averages 35.7 points per game, good for 3rd in the conference. Last season, the Oklahoma defense didn't have to deal with Jalen Daniels or Daniel Highshaw Jr., and Kansas still carved them up to the tune of 42 points. The defense has improved, but will face a tough task this weekend. Outside of the Texas offense, the Kansas offense was the one I thought leading into the season would pose the biggest threat to the Oklahoma defense, and I stand by that statement leading into this matchup. Going into the season, the Kansas defensive line was seen as a weak point, but they have impressed through the first half of the year, led by the play of Minnesota transfer Austin Booker, who is tied for 3rd in the Big 12 in sacks with 5. Kansas as a team sits near the top of the conference in sacks, which is in large part due to the improvement along the line of scrimmage. The Jayhawks returned their linebacker core and are deeper at the position than they have been in the past. The secondary is also returning a group that has held teams to an average of 235 yards passing per game, sitting in the middle of the Big 12. Senior safety Kenny Logan Jr. leads the team in total tackles, and corners Quentin Lassiter and Kobe Bryant lead the team with 2 interceptions each. There hasn't been much to write home about regarding the special teams unit, but honestly, sometimes that's a good thing. Kicker Seth Keller is currently 7 of 8 on field goals. Overall, the Jayhawks defense has improved since last season, forcing 9 turnovers and allowing just over 6 points per game fewer than last year. The veteran leadership on that side of the ball will be put to the test this week against Dylan Gabriel and Oklahoma's offense. If Kansas gets their run game going early, then this has the potential to get out of hand. Oklahoma needs to make it a point of emphasis to control the line of scrimmage and prevent the Jayhawks' 2 stud backs from finding space to run free. Last year, Oklahoma ran for nearly 300 yards against Kansas. While I don't anticipate that happening this year, getting a run game going and controlling the clock will be a big part of the Sooners' success, not just here but through the rest of the season. Whether it's Walker, Sawchuk, or Major, please get something going. Remember when Kansas was a gimme win? I do. In fact, Oklahoma hasn't lost a game to Kansas since 1997, but that's not the case anymore. The Jayhawks have an explosive offense and a respectable defense. Plus, fans actually show up to their home games now. In all seriousness, this is a game I think Oklahoma can easily lose if they aren't locked in. Dylan Gabriel has had a clean pocket most of the season, and his performance has shown as evidence. In order to slow the Sooners, Kansas will need to pressure DG into making some errors, force Oklahoma to rely on its inconsistent run game. The OU defense has made its identity playing downhill and aggressive. Use misdirection, pull out trick plays, and do what it takes to make them pay for any mistake they make. Mans and Lawrence have their fingers crossed that Jalen Daniels will be healthy on Saturday, which would make a huge impact on the game. But whether it's him or Jason Bean that gets the nod, QB1 is going to need to provide the team with a boost. You can't just manage the game and expect to beat OU. Before the season started, I had this game marked as a potential loss for Oklahoma. I also had Kansas as a top 4 Big 12 team, but things change when your star quarterback is out. Even if Jalen Daniels does suit up, I don't think he'll be 100%. Combine that with the week of tough practice coming off a close game against UCF, and I think a fired up Oklahoma squad wins this one in Lawrence 35-17. Where do Oklahoma and Kansas sit all time in Big 12 history? I'll give you a hint, it's on opposite sides of the spectrum. Click this video to find out. As always, have a great day and see y'all at the next one.